you can't understand America if you sit in a big city. You have to get out and you have to meet rural communities. You have to meet farming communities. You have to meet people of all different persuasions just to understand what makes America tick, because it's too easy just to watch TV and pretend you understand.
Welcome to Taking Stock with Illinois Farm Bureau. This podcast brings together Farm Bureau leadership, members, distinguished guests to talk about the issues important to agriculture. Today we're taking stock of partnerships and trade. We are on the farm today in Ogle County. The president of the Illinois Farm Bureau hosting is Brian Duncan. Vice President, IFB, Evan Hultine is with us, and our distinguished guest, UK Consul General Richard Hyde. Welcome to all of you, and President Duncan, what a day for a podcast.
Oh, what a great day, Rita, Evan. I'm going to call you Richard because you said that was, and we agreed you were going to call me Brian.
Absolutely.
Which is a lot better than a lot of people call me. So that's
so I've heard.
so it is. We had quite a morning talking about American agriculture, talking about partnerships. We spent the morning farming, going from field to fields. You saw two different planters, one moving, one not. You saw three different tillage operations, I think. Yeah, three different tillage operations. You have a staff with you who was brave enough to actually get in the equipment with my team and spent some time and poked your nose in some hog buildings. Mm-hmm. And so you got a real broad taste of Northern Illinois agriculture. And my question is, why are you here?
Well, but the easy answer is why not, right? I mean, I live in a big city. We diplomats around the U.S., we all live in big cities, and they're wonderful places. But you can't understand America if you sit in a big city. You have to get out and you have to meet rural communities. You have to meet farming communities. You have to meet people of all different persuasions just to understand what makes America tick, because it's too easy just to watch TV and pretend you understand. You actually get out and meet real people. And you said we were farming this morning. I was watching a lot of people working, doing real jobs. I didn't do any farming. I just got to watch them. But it was really interesting to see three things. One is that it matters so much to Americans, to the U.S. economy, to the world economy, what America produces. The people I saw today out in the fields, in the tractors, your family, your colleagues, your friends, they really love what they do, and that's really inspiring. And the third thing is that, you know, farming's tough, and I know farming's tough because I've met lots of farmers in my career. But farming's hard work, but it's really inspiring. There's a lot of young people. All of your kids are involved in farming. Your grandkids seem to be really energized by farming, and so it's for me, you get a whole sense of this thing matters. It's really hard work. You know, people in government, whether here or in the UK, we need to think about farmers. We need to think about what you deliver to our tables every day. And so, yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm here to learn, to interact with people, and to be kind of inspired to kind of think more about where my food comes from.
Yeah, because I was so surprised. We met on Ag Day down at the Capitol. And I just casually tossed out, you know, would you like to come to my farm sometime? And it was like immediately. Then I get a phone call like 2 days later. Consul General Hyde wants to come to your farm. And then I'm like, oh, well, that's going to be pretty cool. So,
well, like I said, the real reason for that is that we'd heard a rumor about your wife's potatoes.
They are working.
And your pulled pork is pretty good too. But but seriously, it's because you throw out an offer like that, I'm going to take it because I want to come and meet, all Americans, real Americans, Americans doing different things, and you can't do that sitting in the beautiful city of Chicago.
Yeah, and you got a chance to spend some time with what I kindly refer to as the next generation of Farm Bureau leadership, my Vice President, Evan Hultine. Evan, I heard you were talking about agriculture and education and land-grant universities and technology and all those things that I can't talk about. So I'm glad you're here today.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And it's just been a nice morning visiting with you and your team and kind of covering the whole chasm of agriculture. And I think you got to see a little bit of all the diverse ages that we're dealing with. We talked about some of the implications and limitations for getting younger people involved in ag and really kind of covered some of the host of things that we're facing. So it's great to interface with you all and be able to have that exchange and break down some of those barriers of understanding for sure.
I mean, one of the big educations for me this morning as well was to hear you two guys, who are clearly passionate about farming, but if I can say from different generations, is that
all right?
Is that a polite way of saying it?
All right. Yes, I'm reminded frequently. Yes,
but it's where technology comes in and the
Yeah,
risks and the opportunities of technology that we'll be discussing,
Yep.
and to hear the two of you kind of explaining to me, a city slicker, that it sounds great to have all this technology, but there's a risk to it as well. And what the work that you do along with universities to help educate farmers to take those risks appropriately that work for them. There's got to be a return. Yeah. And you're not gambling, but you're kind of in the hands of God and weather and rain, and it's a tough business. So it was really fascinating to hear your conversations around adoption of technology.
And those conversations go on in farm families across the state and across the country. The conversations that Evan and I have, and Evan will tell you, he's talked to my kids. When I think Evan's words were, "Well, my planter's not exactly like Brian's," and then he starts to explain the technological advancements that he's using and the challenges there. But yes, we are of different generations. But I think you also saw one of my employees, 84, and working, and so you saw multiple generations today, all very much passionate about agriculture. But I don't think it's different when you go visit with farmers in the UK, is it? Aren't farmers the same everywhere?
Pretty much, yeah. They get up really early, they work really late, and they work really hard. That's the thing that you most importantly have in common. I think the challenge in the UK is a different scale. So you were talking about the size of your landhold and the size of the farms the size of the farm that you cultivate. I mean, that's huge by UK standards. So the challenges are different. We use technology. We have to use technology in a different way because the yield is so much more important because of the size of the area they're working with. So yeah, the farming, they're coming from a different angle, but the outcome has to be the same, which is good quality food for the table, and that matters. And I think one of the things that our farmers and American farmers can collaborate on is how do we adopt each other's technologies that we developed in different ways because of different demands of the industry, and where are the technologies in the UK that we've created to fix one problem, how can that be adapted and used in the United States for another? So we were talking about drones, for example.
Right.
There's a lot of investments in the UK around UK universities about how do we use that kind of new air technology to help inform, using satellites to help inform rainfall patterns, and how do you deal with unexpected rainfall or unexpected droughts. But believe it or not, we get droughts now in the UK. Things are changing. How do we use that technology in the UK, and can that be adapted and used in a bigger scale in the US? And conversely, what are you doing in terms of farming that we can take those technologies and apply them in the UK? And there's lots of that going on. And one of the things we're trying to do, and one of the many reasons that we've visited you, is we want representatives of the farm bureaus across the US and obviously in Illinois today to go to the UK and to engage with our farmers, because I think I'm a government guy. The last person farmers want to be told what to do is by government people. You don't want us telling us what you do. But when two farmers sit at the table from different countries, they can have a conversation and we just get out of the way. So our job is to bring you guys together and then just move out the way and leave you to it, because you'll come up with solutions.
No, we were over, was it 2022 was when we took the trip to the UK, and we did hear and went with some farmers, and I came back feeling very fortunate that we have an organization like Farm Bureau that has the input and the ear of the government officials and legislators. And we spent some time today talking about strategies around things like a farm bill and environmental challenges and things that we're trying to do. UK farmers, and I guess just give me a sense of how they're doing these days. I know when we were over there, it was post-Brexit. It obviously still is post-Brexit, but there was some concern I sensed in rural and parts and talking to farmers. What's life like for the UK farmers now post-Brexit, and how are they going to go forward?
So we're 9 years on now from the vote and 6 years on from actually leaving the EU. So I think we can talk about it. It's a reality.
It's here to stay.
It's never going to change. But that said, I think it's tough. I think farmers finding it tough. Obviously, I think we all recognise that if you have a seamless movement of trade across borders, and then you make that less seamless, that's going to come with costs, and it's going to come with delays, and it's going to come with challenges. And I think farmers were already operating on very, very tight margins, and if they're made slightly less competitive, then that can really hurt their business. So I think farmers have struggled over the last few years, and I think the government right now is in deep negotiations with our friends in the European Union to try, without kind of talking about going back into Europe. That's just not going to happen. But it's how do we get back to a point of trust with the European Union where we can remove some of those barriers again to allow our farmers and all of our businesses, but specifically farmers we're talking about today, to allow them to get back to almost seamless trade again, so that, you know, whether it be livestock or whether it be crops or whether it be, you know, fruit and vegetables, it can move quickly enough and seamlessly enough, and without the bureaucracy and the paperwork that we've kind of created in recent years to allow them to do business again. And that goes for European farmers supplying us in the UK as well, because it's not just about farmers; it's also about price and cost. This brings cost of groceries and food down. And just like in the US, we're really sensitive to inflation. And inflation, one of the big causes of inflation, of course, is food. And so anything we can do to make that more seamless, that's got to be the plan of the government.
So Richard, what I'm kind of hearing from you sounds an awful like some of the things we're hearing about concerns of where we are at right now as American farmers, and some of the trade issues we're hearing about and concerned about, and you know, are farmers in the UK looking at us and have a mind fly or concern, or what are they thinking about when they're seeing the situation that we find ourselves in right now?
It's tough. Look, I mean, the world's been through some big shocks in the last few years. You know, we had COVID. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, tariffs. Look, the president of the United States is elected with a mandate. He said he was going to do this. We're free traders. We don't like tariffs, but we recognize the right of the president of the US to do what he said he was going to do. We're working with the US government to kind of to limit the impact of that on folks here and on folks on our side, because we want to trade as much as we possibly can with the US. We're not a threat to the United States. We don't undercut you on price. We don't cheat on dumping and all those other things that other countries do, which has triggered this approach. Our game, our angle is, look, we're not a threat to the United States. We're a great partner with the United States. We sell you things that you need, that you don't produce. You sell us things that we need and we don't produce. And if we both produce them, then we'll compete on price. And, you know, you've got kind of a big scale, so you've got a bit of an advantage there as well. So the message that we're giving to the administration over and over again is, we're your friends. We want to trade with you. Completely get why you're doing what you're doing. But let's talk about how do we make it as easy as possible to do business with the United States. And we're doing it quietly, and we're doing it privately, and we're trying to just explain to the administration, this is what we bring to the table. You know, we're one of, US is our biggest trading partner. You know, and our bilateral trade actually is slightly imbalanced towards the US, so we import more from you than we export to you. So, you know, this can only be good if we remove tariffs and barriers to UK-US trade. Over time, if we get an agreement of some description, it's not going to be a comprehensive free trade agreement, but we are working on an agreement with the administration just to make it a bit easier. And it makes it easier for your farmers to sell to us, and it makes it easier for our farmers to sell to you. And that's got to be the end game.
So we've talked about the farmer sentiment, and so what about the consumer sentiment in the UK? I mean, they had to have been impacted by Brexit. You mentioned higher prices, which were the result of some of these things. And I know, again, from talking with your farmers, they deal with some fairly, onerous regulations. We are regulated too, but your farmers seem to have next level, at least prior to Brexit, we know the EU regs, but particularly around livestock production, adaptation of some of the modern technologies, and all of these technologies and these production practices that we use in this country could have the impact of lower costs for your consumers. Are your consumers starting to say, hey, maybe we're interested in something if costs are lower, or are they still very much This is how we want our products produced. This is how it's going to be, and this is what we're going to buy.
I think I doubt consumers really understand the kind of minutiae of the difference in production in the US and the UK and the EU. Price is really important. I mean, the challenge, I think, is that there have been so many different concurrent shocks into the system that it's very difficult to say if these price increases were Brexit related, if these prices were COVID related, supply chain related, energy cost related. So it's not really clear to the consumer. So I don't think it's driving a consumer demand for cheaper food. Of course, everybody wants cheaper food, and consumers make a choice. And there's lots of different supermarkets you can shop in based on price and quality, and people do shop at different supermarkets. So consumers are smart about that. I think the challenge for government is that the standards are different. They're not better or worse. They're just different. And it's quite hard then to explain to consumers why we're going to change the way we label things, or to change the way, cattle are raised, or pigs are raised, or corn is produced. It's quite hard to do that. And governments has many, many problems, and maybe that's one they don't necessarily want to have to take on right now. But I think we're getting to a point, and technology, as we merge our technologies, I think we'll get to the point down the road where this becomes an easier conversation. And there's ways of carving out bits of industry. I know the US cattle producers, for example, for a number of years have produced cattle specifically for the Australian market, which is a big market for beef. So there are ways of producing. It's more expensive to do it that way, because you've kind of you've got to change the husbandry, you've got to change the technologies, but there is a way of doing it if there's a market to produce a product that is for that market specifically. So there are ways around it, but I don't see this being consumer driven.
Okay.
And I see a lot of hostility still in the media in the UK to this.
You still do. That's what I wondered, if it had calmed down. Any mad cow was very real.
Yeah.
And had so is there still that still has coattails on what your farmers and what your consumers deal with?
Yeah, I mean, I was living in France at the time when La Vache Folle, as they called it, the mad cow. This devastated our industry.
It did,
and then we had foot and mouth not long afterwards, which further devastated related industries, and so the levels of regulation that we had to impose to not get ourselves in that position again. It's very difficult to row back from that.
Yes,
because for the individual farmer, it's tough. But for the wider industry, the mistakes we made in the past, repeating those mistakes by deregulation, it's a tough political thing to do. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think that it does go back to all of that. And the challenge in the UK is that our media is really, our media doesn't, it doesn't play games. If we make a mistake, they will shout it from the rooftops, and so you can't hide these things.
Yeah, well, you don't want to, right?
No, we don't. Of course, no one does.
No one does. We want to be upfront and honest and tell a good story.
But if you've burnt your fingers a few times, you're going to wear lots of gloves, right?
You're right.
And that's the challenge.
That's right.
I think you're right. I hadn't really thought that one through, but I think you're right. I think there is a consumer hangover from those two big disasters in the 90s.
Yep.
That makes us a little bit more risk averse when it comes to changing the way.
Understandably.
Yeah.
So I think we'll take a break right now, Richard, and then we're going to pick up on the backside of the break with how we go forward together and what future agreements look like. Again, as you and I have talked throughout the morning, the world would look very different today if it wasn't for the relationship, the historic relationship between the United States and the UK. Mm-hmm. And let's see here if in the office of a farm in Ogle County, Illinois, if we can't do something to make it even better.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Let's head into the break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the next generation for both of us. Back on Taking Stock with Illinois Farm Bureau. What a treat on this very busy spring day to be with such leaders in the Farm Bureau and a special guest, UK Consul General Richard Hyde, talking about the important relationships, Evan, as we start this segment, and the future. As a young farmer, that's where we're going to start.
Yeah, I think, part of the reason for this get together today was to talk about, what's next in the relationship and what does the future look like. And I think, for Brian and I, a lot of that work is what does our next generation of farmers look like and what are the opportunities that lie ahead for them. And we talked about that a little bit this morning, Richard, on the farm here, but kind of curious, what do you see in the UK? I mean, some of the challenges you've talked about already with some of your farmers face. I mean, we know here in the 80s we lost a generation of farmers because the challenges were just so immense that parents told their kids, don't live like this, don't come back, don't farm, go find something else. What are you seeing in the UK, or what opportunities do you think are lying ahead, or challenges that are going to be there for having the next generation of farmers in the UK?
Well, I've got to say, I'm probably more worried than I would be if I was an American. I think, in the time I've spent in the United States, what's been really impressive is the way the farmer communities come together to promote the industry. Whether it be livestock shows and the young farmers of America programs, and the multi-generational idea of keeping this industry alive because it's good for America is really, really strong and comes through. It's impressive. I don't think we really have that in the UK. We don't really have that culture in the UK. I think farming in the UK is tough as it is here, but I fear that we haven't quite figured out, whether it be through the actions of the farming community, through government, through other organisations, how do we support making farming not just interesting and exciting, but lucrative enough to be able to sustain. I mean, every parent's job is to make their kids secure, ideally more secure than they were when they were young. And if you're a farmer in the UK, that's a challenge, and it worries. I mean, I'm a city boy. I'm not a farmer. I don't come from farmer stock, but I've spent enough time traveling the world, meeting with farmers and seeing what farmers do to understand that it's absolutely essential that this industry continues to thrive in the UK. It's fundamental to have. We're never going to be self-sufficient, I don't think, in the UK in food. We haven't been for a long time, but having some ability to feed our people and to export those products to the world is absolutely vital. But it worries me, and I don't know the answer. But maybe this is when we bring folks like you to town. You can talk about what you do here. Jokes aside, I mean, I met your family today, Brian, and it's like they all love farming, and it's it's kind of good to have the president of the farmer of Illinois Farm Bureau having a family that really believes in it as well. But it is actually quite inspiring because I'd love to hope that in the UK we have people and multi-generational families like that, but I'm not sure it is so well entrenched.
I first of all, I gotta say I appreciate the acknowledgement of our youth programs and our FFAs and 4-H. I mean we put a lot of emphasis and effort on
and it's
that,
clear,
and,
right?
and
it's like a religion almost that you want to make sure that people believe for the next generation.
Yeah, I mean we have kids that will quit sports to go be part of their ag programs, right? So appreciate that recognition, but I hearing your concerns there, it just makes me kind of wonder, and as we've talked a little bit today about some of the historical context of our country's relationships and all the focus right now, at least in our country, on trade and partnerships and build out, and how do we have that successful future for the next generation. And a lot of that comes down to productivity, right? I mean, you talked about that a lot, Brian, this morning, that how do we help ensure some economic feasibility is still there for the next generation.
What from the UK's perspective, so as we look to go forward in this relationship, what are some next steps? You said you're quietly talking to the administration, and it sounds your similar tactic. We just keep talking about how important trade is for American agriculture. Whatever the administration is, we said the same thing to the last administration that we're saying trade matters. It is fundamental to the economic success of American agriculture. Where can we go together to get some wins here, man? What do you think, Richard? What if you and I were just gonna set something up here today? Where can we look for wins for both of us?
I think I mean, the most important thing is that it's us, right? It's not one country alone. You know, for the last 150 years, we've kind of demonstrated to the world that when the UK and the US work together, good things happen, right?
Yep.
If good things happen in World War One and World War Two, and all of the conflicts since then, good things can happen in trade as well. I think trade is probably a little easier.
Yeah.
The Cold War was a bit more complicated than trade.
But I mean, again, the united front that our two countries had throughout, even you mentioned the Cold War.
Yep.
I mean, it is a spectacular footprint in history, our relationship.
Yep. I mean, in my roles in the US, I've had the pleasure a number of times of meeting former President Bush, and he still talks about, W still talks about the fact that the UK stood side by side with America in its hour of need after 9/11, and the Prime Minister at the time, who was a very different party to him, a left-leaning Prime Minister to a right-leaning American president, sacrificed his legacy, these are his words, to go into Iraq side by side with America. That is a demonstration of how important the relationship is to us. It's a two-way relationship. It's not, President Trump talks a lot about, countries taking advantage of the United States with some justification, right? There was definitely reasons why he is taking those actions. The UK is not one of those countries. The UK sees the relationship with the United States as something that we have to pay into as well. And it's give and take in every relationship, and we give a lot to that relationship, and we have historically, and that's been in blood as well as in trade. And I think we doesn't give us a right to a different treatment to the United States, but my job and the job of my colleagues around the United States is just to make sure Americans of all persuasions, of all political parties, city folk, rural folks, remember that we are your friend, and we want to work with you, and together we can actually fix some of these global problems that face us. And that is threats from countries like China in terms of economic threats. It could be Russia and Ukraine. It could in Middle East and terrorism. These are all threats that we can tackle together. So it feels to me that trade has got to be the lubricant in that process, right? It's something that we can do easily. It gives wealth and opportunity to young people in industries like agriculture. It gives opportunities, and what I'd love to see is more kind of young farmers from the UK coming to the United States and figuring out how you guys do it, and likewise young farmers from here. And we have a program in Iowa that we're piloting over the next year called Cultivo, which is basically we're bringing some agricultural technology companies early stage out into Iowa to run some programs. It's kind of an incubator program to see if their technologies are transferable into the US and if they can grow out their business here. So it's that kind of thing, getting young, brilliant people in and around the industries to talk to each other, to engage with each other, and to experience each other's behaviors and cultures, and and food and drink and friendship, and basically just trying to grow the industries together. And I think that would be a wonderful outcome.
It could then lead to maybe some agreement on some future technologies, because we know technology keeps coming, and so we've looked back and we say, okay, there's just some technologies that have some roadblocks in the UK, but maybe there's some new ones on the horizon. I'm thinking CRISPR or some other technologies that are being worked on in a lab at a land-grant university or in Oxford.
Yep.
that maybe just working on coming to some basic agreements on standards, measures, just some sort of tolerances and thresholds of what's acceptable and what science we're going to use would, to me at least, be a huge first step. And I think you're right. I love the way you put it, because I've come to that same conclusion too. Looking backwards and trying to undo from a regulatory standpoint where the EU or where the UK is now. You're there for a set of reasons. Mm-hmm. I mean, the reasons are what they are. But as we go forward, then let's talk openly and try to find some standardization on some of these new technologies so they don't become barriers, so that we just go forward with them together. Yeah. And they are what they are.
we find ways around them using technology that's coming available. But I just want to say, after half a day with the Brit on the phone, we've now got Brian talking about technology. I'm pretty proud of myself.
I think where his farm would be if you were here a few years ago.
Here, you want
his spacing was pretty impressive. Though.
You want to watch the color drain out of his face. I can just pull up my box and show him how many unanswered emails I have.
but I think, for me, more of our young farmers coming together on a more regular basis, and it's a challenge for the Farm Bureau as well. If we can find a way of doing that, that actually then gives them inspiration to try things differently, and that over time will find new ways of producing products that are applicable and acceptable in both cultures, because it is a cultural difference.
It is.
In
production. Yeah, and certainly bolstering our involvement and the excitement of our young farmers is something we're very interested in. I think we're probably, even though we could sit here all afternoon and talk, but Rita, go ahead.
And you talked about it at the start about Illinois. Can you break that down more specifically to why this state is so important to you guys? And I know ethanol is huge and so on. So would you mind talking a little bit to that?
Yeah, Illinois is it's the fifth largest economy in the United States. Over $1 trillion of output. It's also one of, in state terms, one of our biggest trading partners. We trade significantly in Illinois. The honest reality is that our services trade in Illinois is really substantial. But we import a lot of product, agricultural product as well. Ethanol is a really big deal. So some of the corn, some of the soya from Illinois ends up in fuel in the UK. So it really matters. But I think there's more we can do on that. There were some issues around the use of corn in notionally, as we would define it, the use of food products in the production of fuel. But I think in the UK government, we're certainly looking at how do we kind of flex.
I was going to say, isn't there some nuance that we can come to a conclusion in that discussion?
I think there were conversations on that right now. Again, it's one of those. It's not a long list of things that we're looking at, but definitely, we're probably more focused on that decarbonization of energy than maybe folks are here. It's a bigger deal for us. We've got obligations in government to do that. So we have to look at every single different source, and ethanol is something that has been, it's a proven model here. And as corn farmers I've met across Illinois and surrounding states have told me over and over again, this is not corn for food. This is corn that's grown for ethanol. So
exactly.
Your definitions, you British need to look at your definitions. Well, we'll look at them. But without any promises, it's something that it's one of the many things we're looking at. How can we unplug some of these barriers?
That's what I've talked about when we can agree upon a standard. That was one I was thinking about. What's this? Can we agree upon a standard of what's grown for food and what's grown for fuel?
And I can promise you, every single time I make one of these visits, I feed that back into the energy team and say, folks, I've met more farmers who keep telling me they'd love us to be using their corn and their soy in ethanol production. So we keep feeding it back in. But as I say, these things take a little time. Yep. We have the regulations we have for good historic reasons, and all I can do is keep meeting folks like yourselves and keep feeding that message in, and hopefully down the road we'll find some compromise.
I certainly hope so, and I hope to have another conversation with you as we go forward. Evan, final thoughts?
Well, the old adage of there's no better education than travel comes to mind, and I kind of inspired. It sounds like maybe we have a teaser for a young farmer trip in the works down the road here.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
I think that sounds fantastic. But just very appreciative of your time and your ability to sit and visit with us and share your thoughts with our members through the podcast.
Which, just to say, I'm not alone today. I've got three of my team with me. I've got Tim Backey, who runs all of our trade and investment operations across the Midwest. So obviously trade is a big part of his portfolio. I've got Melissa, who is our political advisor. You're probably wondering, why is a political advisor? Because we know the politics of rural America is very different to the politics of urban America, and we want to learn why and what makes you guys tick and what's driving you and what you're worried about. It's interesting to hear that you're worried about many of the same things when it comes to trade as urban Americans. And we've got Deepa, who runs what's grandly called Global Issues, which is basically all of those things that we want to think about, like agriculture, like energy, that kind of cross-cut everything. And her job is to sew it all together. And the one thing we have just done, the day we met you, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the state of Illinois, and that is all targeted on finding areas where the UK really wants to focus and where Illinois really wants to focus, and we want to intensify our activity in those areas. And it's very technology driven, but one of the areas of technology is agricultural technology. So agriculture is very central to kind of the narrower focus that we have now with the state of Illinois. So Illinois matters to us, and we want to do more and more. I really appreciate the invitation. I really appreciate the education, and I most appreciate the food.
Well, thanks to saying yes. Rita, take us out.
Oh, yeah, what a treat. Really a blessing to be here today and be a part of this conversation. It has been Taking Stock with Illinois Farm Bureau.